Okay, we'll open the budget session of Monday, the 20th of October at 5:15 p.m. And this is going to be general fund and wrap up of the fire department. And I'm going to turn it over to Manager Gerard to start us off with the general fund.
Well, excuse me, right at the beginning of the general fund, Jason is here for planning and zoning, and Dulcie is here for the assessing and deputy treasurer. And I guess I would like to not have to have them sit here if we really don't have any concerns or questions with those two. The only comments that I made in my narrative, basically, with regard to both of those, basically, is that essentially their last year's budget's just updated for current costs. And the only item that I had in there was just reflecting that the shared position, the planning and zoning support staff, the technician MCAT, is shared equally between those two, the 50-50 basically. Treasurer Johnson was the only one who asked me any questions about either of those, and it was with the deputy treasurer side of it, and he was concerned about the split of the time between assessing and deputy treasurer. And I think he misread what was in the budget. He thought that it was at 50-50. It's not. It's 80% assessing, 20% deputy treasurer. So that was really the only question that he asked. 75-25. Is it 75-25? Okay, 75-25. He thought it was 50-50. So and that was really the only question that was asked on either of those.
Okay, I guess we'll start with Lynn. Do you have any questions on the planning and zoning?
Planning. I really liked the way Jason laid it out with explaining. I had it here. There we go. I guess so. The only thing I'm kind of confused on is some of the narration says that things aren't changing, but the actual amounts requested are changing.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure.
We got Janelle a phone, and we kind of split that between two departments.
Use the microphone, Jason, there, so you can get on the tape. Just turn it on and it should be okay.
Can you hear me now?
Not yet.
How about now? Okay.
Yep.
There was a late entry. I don't know if it was after the narrative was written, but I believe it was, where we got a phone for Janelle, cell phone. We split the cost between planning and assessing, and that was the bump in the phone line. And then the only other change was a $2,000 reduction in contracted services, just because we finished up the master plan and the big zoning text amendment and everything. So it was actually a net decrease in the overall budget, except for health insurance costs and those things that were out of my control.
Yeah, because it looks like the difference between the estimate for 2014 and 15 is $18,000. So some of it is taken up in the payroll stuff. We got 13 right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that was. Yep, I had a question at the phone. Okay.
And actually, the overtime line item is probably one of the bigger ones, and that's because of all the meetings that we've been having, after-hours meetings, and it's not really overtime, it's the comp time accrual.
I can update the narrative to reflect the change and get that reissued to you.
Yeah, I really didn't have anything. It was pretty straightforward, just the difference. I know we've changed some of the account numbers, so, but repair and maintenance you had as 960, and apparently it's 930. I don't know if that's a big deal. If it has to be perfect on the record. The narrative says 960.
Oh.
Oh, sure.
Itself says 930, so.
Okay. I can correct that.
So you're gonna end up, will you have a different submittal number then because of the phone and stuff, or is this gonna kind of stand and?
No, it'll be under the 850, and I'll just No, I had not planned on a different submittal number.
Okay, they'll stay, okay. Yeah, that's really all I wondered.
Any questions, Pete?
No, I was just hoping that overtime would drop down a little bit, but I mean, and then Randy straightened me out on that other thing I had a question on. I compared it to last year, 2013, and just some numbers changed much, but with all the stuff that we had going, it's followed pretty much in line, except for, you know, some of the smaller questions that I had answered already, so. Let's see, is there anything else on that page? Assessor, I got checked off, all right. It seemed like, you know, travel and conferences for assessors, but I mean, you have to have all those in order to upgrade. How are we standing as far as, is there more time going into upgrading the properties?
That wouldn't be an overtime.
No, but
Expense.
how are we doing on that one?
Oh, we're going
we
through
doing?
Trowbridge Park right now.
Okay, all right.
So we're in year 4 of the 5-year plan for the reappraisal.
Okay. What do you usually pick up when you do something like that? Is there a certain percent that,
Trowbridge Park had been visited a little bit more frequently than some of the north area properties, but it's like when somebody builds a garage and they pulled their permit, a lot of times, you know, we didn't have people going out and getting the value, so it could be 5%.
yeah? Probably not the belong to you, no? Let me just check on the narrative, and I think that's what's all my professional services, is there? Give me 1 second. No, I don't have any more questions. I got a couple things highlighted, but nothing I would ask that make a big difference.
Just as an update to the one question you asked about the 5-year plan, the assessing plan. Basically what that's doing is that's bringing back into line a lot of the properties that had not been looked at in quite a bit of time, and there were some fairly significant changes to some of the properties that ultimately at the end of the 5-year period will have a much more accurate tax base.
That's good. We don't need any vehicles for her to get out. Our vehicle in pretty good shape for her to use it and get out, or?
Well, not really. You know, we are in the process, 2014, of trying to replace 2 vehicles. You know, one for building and grounds and one for the joint use of assessing, planning, and basically everybody else. We've got the Impala that we took back from the sheriff's department rather than traded in, that we've been using for travel, and that's reduced cost. Now, there've been some repairs that have to be done on it, but overall it's still a net positive. But the Jeep is getting kind of long in the tooth. It was the fire department's Jeep first, and it's just getting tired, basically,
Yeah.
just from age.
That's one of the reasons I've asked. I've seen it, and I know we had it for a long time. Sometime when they go out, a car is not going to do it.
No, well, and it's, you know, it's when it was inside with the fire department and well-maintained by the fire department, since then it's been outside most of the time in the weather, and it's starting to rust. I mean, it's just age. It happens.
But we are looking forward to
Yes,
doing
what we're trying to do is we're shopping right now to replace both the Jeep and the Ranger pickup that Building and Grounds has with slightly bigger, that mid-sized truck that both could use to get off to do the things that they need to do out in the woods and various places outside of the developed area right here in Central Township.
Otherwise, the numbers seem to be, you know, pretty much in line. So, I hope we have a good coming year, so. No. I wouldn't have any more questions right now.
Any questions, Lynn, of the treasurer or of assessing?
No, it's pretty cut and dried. Nice one-pager.
Yeah, when I reviewed it, it was really similar to last year, so I didn't really have any questions over it, so.
I got one, Jason, in a plan this coming year, what's coming up, is there any big expenditures for us as far as attorneys and that you know of that we might need?
No, I think we probably maxed out Roger this year with master plan update, zoning ordinance updates, a couple of property maintenance issues that he's been working on. So, no, in fact, with contracted services, using consultants and things like that, as a result of these two big plans being done, and our recreation plan being revised, I've actually reduced that.
We should have a lot of that behind us now.
Correct. At least for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And we do along those same lines. We do have a little bit of flexibility in the line of the professional services line item. I do have an attorney's line item in there that we've projected out some of the costs for the tax tribunal case with Lowe's going forward to the Supreme Court, along with the Stantec case with Public Works going to arbitration, and then civil counsel general backup for the board. So that takes in some of that as well.
That was only 15,000, wasn't it? Is that
Oh.
in the general fund you were talking about?
Attorney services is
70,000.
It's under, right at the beginning, under professional services, just below the supervisor. Five professional services.
Oh, I looked at my line wrong. I was gonna say, because 15,000 isn't enough.
Yeah.
That was one of the questions I was gonna ask. Okay, I'm glad you clarified that.
And who knows where we're going with that?
Well, and if some of those things settle out without having to go full bore, we anticipate, we hope anyway, that the Stantec case will settle as opposed to going to arbitration, which would then reduce that would put that money back into the fund balance.
Okay, well, I'll pass along to the other board members if they have questions of planning or assessing, or Ernie can handle the treasurer side of things when he returns. I think we're good, and I'll dismiss you for the evening.
Thank you.
Bob, you're not lucky. You're not lucky enough yet, Bob and Dan. Okay, I guess that gets to anything. Does Manager Gerard have anything else to start with the general fund?
Well, we can run through the narrative if you wish, or if you have some specific questions, we can address those first and then go through the rest of the narrative.
I think we can probably start with the narrative,
Okay.
and then hopefully we'll start with that, and we'll see where we go with that.
All right, as we've talked with most all the budgets so far, the approach that I took with the general fund is the same as we've taken with Public Works and everything, and the fire department so far. Is that presented for you in the paperwork two scenarios. Basically, the scenario under the department request is if we're successful at the Supreme Court level and we have revenues coming in as we would normally expect. And then on the manager's recommendation is taking the opposite side of that and saying that we're not successful at the Supreme Court, and I've reduced then the revenue stream correspondingly to give you both ends of that spectrum. Most likely, we're going to come in somewhere between that, and at that point, you would be adjusting the budget and the budget amounts as necessary throughout the year. So that's just kind of a precursor. Under
How
Township,
long do you think that's going to last?
say again?
How long do you think that's going to last?
Which?
Tax tribunal thing.
The Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Well, they are starting now to come back and to take a look at what their docket might be for the remainder of the year and then for the first part of next year. They are getting some pressure from the governor's office to put this at a relatively high priority, not because we're involved with the Lowe's case, but because the state is involved with the IBM case, which is, it's a little bit similar. It's somewhat different. That results from corporations in the state of Michigan moving their corporate headquarters out of state and then falling under the other state's taxes. It's estimated to cost the state of Michigan about $1 billion in tax revenues over some period of time, basically. So the state treasurer is now involved with filing actions with the tax tribunal it was a tax tribunal decision, so they're now involved in that discussion, which dovetails then into the discussion of the impact of retail. Now that the retail challenges have gone to city level, the cities are starting to get challenged. Now it's taking on a bigger picture statewide. So all of those things, I think, go to help with our argument with Lowe's, and there's a pretty good chance that the Supreme Court will take up the case. If they do take the case up, we're much more encouraged because the Supreme Court applies law as opposed to what's been presented in prior trials. So they would go and interpret what the legislature intended with the laws that were passed. So we're hoping that that comes back in our favor. So along those lines, I've taken a conservative approach with a lot of these. For instance, under the Township Board, and I'm going right through the narrative now. Travel and conference, I've only estimated for 2 board members to be going to the conference in January and set the budget, estimating it on that basis. Under contracted services, I've got $15,000 in for professional services associated with the improvements to Lions Field, which we're involved in right now with the development of the ice rink and the kiddie park. Attorney services, I have $70,000 in there, and again, this is an estimate. It's related on what we think we're going to spend going forward to the Supreme Court with the Lowe's case.
Last year was 35.
Mm-hmm. And then with Stantec arbitration case, we're not sure where that's going to go. We're in the process right now of having the arbitrator start to take information in the case. Our objective there is to get Stantec to reimburse us for some of the $310,000 that we settled the case with, am I drawing a blank on the, Harglow, with Harglow and North American Specialties. So we're trying to recover some of that money from Stantec as the engineer. So that's what the arbitration is all about. So that would come in as revenue in addition. It was offset those costs. Then the other piece in there is some of Roger's work representing the board as civil counsel, contract basis. Engineering, the $15,000 that we mentioned earlier, basically is primarily for the design and engineering work for Lions Field, recreation area, and then some other activities with the non-motorized things we're trying to do with complete streets and the trail systems. General engineering. Accounting services is basically our audit, year-end audit, and that's spread among the various departments of the budget.
Now that's 46. Last year was 7,000. What did we do different last year?
The rest of it is spread.
Spread out?
Yeah.
Actually,
That-
we budgeted higher last year.
Yeah.
And when we got the contract, and it was, the bid was much lower,
Mm-hmm.
so actually we paid off right now.
Good.
The bid was 35%.
Mhm.
Less than what we had.
Well, Randy, a lot of the Lions Field stuff that's being done now, well, not a lot, but some of it's already taken up by that grant that we got.
That is additional. It's not for engineering, that's for the actual construction.
Right, but then we've still got contracted services, and so we got 30,000 besides what the grant is. If we've
Some
got
of,
engineering.
yeah, some of that, the
contracted.
15,000 is for Lions Field as well as some other activities. That's your engineering fund, basically, for the board. If you want to go,
Everything.
yeah, if
Oh.
you want to go forward for roads or whatever, where you're going to pay for engineering out of the road commission, that's where that would come from.
Okay.
So it's a general fund for engineering.
Correct. Anywhere in the general fund.
Yeah, right.
Travel and conference, again, the only thing that I've budgeted in travel and conference is the estimated cost for 2 board members, traveling and meals, accommodations at the hotel, those things with the MTA. My budget, basically, the only thing that you're seeing in my budget is last year's budget, basically, just with the built-in increases that we can't avoid. But I do make the comment in there that the hospitalization generally is going up 18% in those areas where there is hospitalization. It's been increased by 18%. That is our estimate currently. We do have proposals. We're awaiting proposals from the 2 bargaining units. All of the staff have met with the insurance representatives and looked at what the options are. Basically, the 18% that's in the budget is we retain our existing package and simply move it to 2015. It'll be an 18% increase, and that is basically predicated upon having to roll the prescription coverage into the insured coverage as opposed to self-insured.
We're going to stay with the same companies.
Not necessarily. The 18% is if we remain with Blue Cross in our current package. There is a proposal from another provider that does provide similar benefits at a lower cost, but it increases deductibles and it increases some of the direct costs to staff. So that's what we're in the process of discussing right now. But for from a budgetary standpoint, I've built the 18% in. It may be less than that, and it may be 18%. Under assessor, I've already mentioned, the only thing that's there basically is just the indication that the planning and zoning technician / MCAT, that's split 50-50 between assessor and planning and zoning. Computer services, that's roughly an estimated increase of what it's going to cost us to convert from Charter to Peninsula Fiber Network. Peninsula Fiber Network throughout the UP is proving to be a more reliable provider than what Charter has been. We've had a variety of issues with Charter up into and including today, with speed, with disconnects, with interruptions of service. Our anticipation is that with PFN we will solve those issues.
How did you hear about them?
PFN has been marketing around the northern Michigan, Wisconsin, and the Upper Peninsula now for about 5 years. And a lot of the local businesses, Fry Chevrolet is one of the most recent ones I know of that have gone on it. Kalkaska County went on PFN for their services about 3 years ago, and they've not been down since they went on with them. So they've been marketing in the area, and 906 has recommended that we do this switch.
Do you know that Lois emails to Lynn and that? Sometimes I get mine, and I sent her one, and it was 3 days late.
Some of that may be with our system in terms of spooling, but our system is run by Charter. I mean,
Okay,
we
I just
use,
want you to be aware of
we use
sometimes
Charter.
Up to 3 days.
Excuse me, but what we're hearing from all of the individuals over that period of time that have gone with PFN is that their service has been more reliable. They've been more responsive. 906 Technologies, who's our internet and IT basically provider, they're our representative. They've dealt with PFN and are convinced that they're a better operation than Charter. So we're making that switch. In fact, it's ready to switch over. It should cut over this week.
Oh, really? This week?
Yep. They ran the connection to our Public Works facility. That's where it comes off of. I believe it comes off of Werner, and it's up to there, and then it's linked through them to us.
And we didn't have any kind of a contract with Charter either then. I mean, business-wise, we just do month to month, but I
Yeah.
don't think.
Same. It's the same thing. We have a separation clause in the contract.
That has no effect on our fee that we get from them?
No, that's a franchise fee. That's for them to do business in the township.
Right.
Yeah, we're one of the customers to Charter. So we're estimating that the estimate from PFN is about a $2,000 difference for the year. Tax Tribunal, again, we have some fees in there, not necessarily for the Lowe's case or any of the currently pending cases, but we do expect it to spread to other businesses, and that's what this is for.
That's what I saw, the 15,000, and I put not enough with a question mark. 'Cause
No, that's, if it continues to spread the way it is to smaller businesses, that's what we anticipate it's gonna cost us
Additional.
in services.
Kind of
Correct.
surprised because last year you had 65,000, this year we got 15,000.
Well, last year was big boxes. It was the 12 big
That was my
boxes that,
question.
Dulcie is gone now, but it was the 12 big boxes that we have in the hopper right now, was for the 65. This is basically covering things, like the local car dealerships, the smaller restaurants, things such as that. Possibly some of the hotels, motels that we anticipate would follow suit. I mean, I would if I was in business. I can't fault the businesses. I mean, if that's the way the tribunal is ruling. And the issue that we have with the tribunal and with the governor's office and with the Supreme Court primarily is we need to be held to the same standard. Everybody has to be on the same card, basically. As it sits right now, the Treasury Department dictates to the assessors how they have to calculate the taxes. That is not a requirement for the tax tribunal to follow. And it needs to be one way or the other. I mean, if we need to do it on a cost basis, we'll do it on a cost basis, but don't tell us we have to do it on this basis and then have the tribunal apply a cost basis, and overturn it. So that's the big issue that has to be resolved in the state. Make sure everybody's playing on the same field. Law enforcement, I'm proposing to move that back up to the 80 hours a week, with the codicil that they will not be policing Walmart.
Is that program set up? No, has the sheriff got that program set up?
Sheriff Lovelace has told us that if we increase he wants to do it anyway, but if we increase if we go forward and increase the staffing to 80 hours, he'll ensure that our deputy does not get pulled for those retail fraud cases.
Well, we've already done our contract with them, right? It's not an annual,
With the sheriff's department.
yeah.
No, this is for 2015. It's an annual contract. Oh, yeah.
Maybe
No, it's not long-term. It's an annual. The last 2 years, there's not been any change to the contract, so we've simply renewed it.
I was thinking it was September renewal or something.
No.
Maybe it's just because we talked
Yeah.
about it.
We negotiate it in September, October, but it goes into effect for January.
Okay, okay.
So that would be the only change. If the board decides to stay at 60 hours a week, you're not going to see that addition. I am recommending the 80. Planning and zoning, we've talked about that one already. The only other item in there is the $3,500 remains in there, $3,500 for allocation as grant match. We're going to far exceed that this year. The grants that are out there are generally 25, 26%. And we've gone forward with the DNR grants. The 2 grants that are currently pending will require that, but we're only keeping the $3,500 in there for next year.
Randy, to back up one time on this Walmart thing,
Yes.
has he assured you that he is being taken care of on that program with the student, that's cadets?
He will initiate it, yeah. And basically, what the sheriff is talking about is he's talking about using the almost ready to graduate folks out of the police academy to work for him in a limited deputy role in the building itself.
Because we have somewhat of an obligation to Walmart also.
Oh, we do. And realistically, we would not be cutting them off. Basically, what we would be saying is that the deputy that we pay for is for law enforcement, road patrol and law enforcement activities. It's not for retail fraud to go and pick up somebody for a pack of gum. If that's the case, you're going to wait for the regularly staffed patrol officer from the sheriff's department to come and police that. But in the interim, he's going to put uniformed, limited authority deputies in a uniform in Walmart to help them with their avoidance.
But as long as they understand, if they have something really serious, they're gonna, that guy's.
Oh, they're going to get. I mean, if somebody's there with a gun or something like that, our deputy's going to respond. But he's not going to go to pick up somebody who's, lifted a DVD. That's going to be the regular sheriff's department patrol. It's not going to be the orange car. It's going to be one of the gold and black cars
Okay.
when they can get there. Critical services, obviously, we're going to respond.
All right. I just want to make sure that we state that,
Oh, yeah. Library services is not falling under the general fund any longer. It's been set up as a separate fund, and you'll see that separately, but it is part of the general fund still, and we'll get to that. Under capital, this was one of the questions you asked. This is where the streetlights, the additional streetlights are here under capital in that 15,000.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Excuse me, and that is to complete our lighting project, our lighting program. The only concern that I have with that is right now the BLP is replacing streetlights with LED lights, similar to what we have out here in the parking lot, and they're a much more directed light. And one of the things that I'm hearing as a criticism to the LED lights is because they are more focused, they're only lighting a smaller area, so it may create dark spots between the lights. So I'm working with BLP on that to see if we can get deflectors, which they have used in some locations at the city of Marquette that spread that light
That was my
out a little
comment
more.
when we started talking about that if you use LED lighting, you end up using more of them if you want to light up an area.
It's a brighter light, but it's a much more focused light. It does not have the overflow that the sodium vapor lights have, the low-pressure sodium lights have currently, which is troublesome to some people because it's lighting areas they don't want lit. But you may get that, you may hear some of that with the LED lights.
Yeah, I have. In your conversation with Light and Power, could they slant those lights back a little bit so it shows more like the center of the road on the other side a little bit, not to intrude on the property?
There
with
may
streetlights.
or may not be adjustable heads. For instance, the heads that we have out here in our lights in the parking lot are not adjustable. They're fixed head, and the only way you can change the focus of those is by putting a lens on there that diffuses. It's like a prism type lens. It diffuses the light out, but that kind of defeats the purpose of the LED.
I was thinking some kind of like a spacer between on the bottom when they hook them on, if they hook them on that way. If it's a bracket.
It
till the
depends,
motor
yeah,
goes.
it depends on the type of light that they're going to be getting, and we'll be seeing those pretty quick. In fact, they've installed some of them over by North Star Academy, so I'll find out from them about that.
And they're not showing what you like to see, the lighting over there. You know, you like to see a little bit more. on the
Oh,
roads
yeah,
and that.
a little more radiation, basically, of the light.
And that was my biggest fear when we went to LED lighting. You know, if you're start lighting up a street, you're gonna need more of them.
And it depends on the light head that you know, what the array of the LEDs
Right.
is and how they're focused, basically how they're aligned, I guess is a better term, because they do focus a straight line, basically.
Some,
light.
I don't have it with me, but some of my notes at home is that on the complete streets, that we call complete streets, we might have to issue or put more lights on it than we wanted to, just for them particularly, because you have walkways on those, and, you know, those
And it's
complete streets and that.
in some place like Trowbridge, you know, and the fire department probably knows as well as anybody. In areas like Trowbridge that are heavily wooded, I don't know that it's going to make that much difference, really, because, you know, you've got a lot of trees are blocking the radiation of the lights to begin with. So as long as it's, you know, it remains heavily wooded as it is, there may not be any notice of a difference in the radiation, and the LED lights do provide a brighter light. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, in the
It is a
area where it
brighter
shines, it's a brighter, whiter light. Excuse me. Township improvements, well, we'll get into the detail on that when we get into the transfer to the township improvements budget. But basically, all that is, it's an in and out line item that transfers from the general fund to township improvements, primarily for the Werner Street millage. Under appropriations, under community promotion, I am still continuing to put $2,500 in there, carry that over for the community garden. We still hope to get one established as soon as we can find somewhere that's suitable for doing it. $3,000 for township beautification signage and plantings. That's basically the planting boxes that we have at the 4 entryways to the township. Excuse me. And $8,000. We are now budgeting $8,000 for community events activities, which we've never budgeted before. It's always come out of the fund balance, and now we're plugging it in as a budgeted item. And that's for basically the 4 events that they sponsor per year.
I think the Business Association was talking about lighting the signs for the signage, plantings and stuff. Is
Mhm.
that, would we help with that, or are they gonna try to do a fundraiser, or?
I'm not sure how, and again, Jason's not here now, but Jason and Ernie are the two that have been working with the Business Association, and as you've noticed, they stained them late summer, basically. They took the old plantings out and stained them, and they'll be putting new plantings in there beginning this next year. I know they have talked about lighting. I'm not sure whether they're gonna look at solar lighting or whether they're gonna try and wire something. It's gonna be difficult to wire something at like Nagani and on Wright Street. So in those areas, something with some solar lamps would probably work reasonably well there.
I didn't know if that was something we were gonna contribute to anyway, or?
They had talked about that, and like I said, I've got the money in there for plantings as well. So, we will do whatever it needs to be done to make it what we want it to be coming in. The other thing we talked about was some kind of wayfinding at the one coming in from the west, the one out near Nagani Township, having a little work with the road commission to have a turnoff there, so you could put a sign, basically, if you want to get to Lowe's or wherever, here's where it's at as you're coming into town. Because as you're coming down that hill in traffic, they don't really want a lot of people looking around to try and find out where's Best Buy, where's Lowe's. They need to be paying attention to the traffic. So we were thinking about putting a wayfinding sign out there with a map. So we'll see how that works. Excuse me. Soil and water conservation, we're again putting $2,000, which we do every year. We add $2,000 for them for some of the work that they do. And as an example, we've got some drainage issues along Badger Creek as a result of some of the frozen drains from this last winter that need to be cleaned up. We've got sand residue, so they'll be working on that. They would use that for that. 4th of July, $1,000 which is what we gave them this last year. We will do that again this year as a result, as a contribution from the Community Events Committee. That's pretty much the comments with regard to the general fund budgets. If you want to jump to the revenue page of the actual budget, unless there are any questions on those items. No questions? Okay. On the very first page of the sheets, the actual budget sheets. I'll wait till everybody gets there.
God darn fingers.
Okay, right at the top, the very first item, you're going to see a significant difference on taxes because we no longer are including the library millage there. That's coming out separately, and you'll see that as we go along here. The other really significant items, if you go down about a little more than halfway down to line item 672, other revenues. With the drawdown of We Energies, they will not be depositing as much to the fly ash landfill as they typically do, so I've cut that by 2/3. I'm sorry, 1/3. It's at 60. I've got it budgeted at 60%.
Excuse me, Randy, where we're at Supervisor Limita,
Oh.
we're going through the revenue of the general fund at the moment. We've went through the narrative. We've assessing and planning. We've already, Jason and Dulcie were here. Any questions were answered, and I did tell, or I am going to inform the rest of the board if they got any questions to deal with them directly.
Okay.
They're not here, and I'll, I guess, turn it back over to Manager Gerard for the rest of the revenue of the general fund.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want to jump right to the fire
We
department?
can do that. I guess we can do that. I'll turn it over to Supervisor Limita now that he's here.
Thank you. Yeah, if you guys don't mind, I wasn't able to be here last week when you had your fire department conversations. And I do have a couple questions in regards to your budget that I don't know if you can answer them in the 10 minutes you have, Bob, but at least I can get them asked, and we can go from there. First off, the first thing, and I gave you the heads up, I think it was on Friday when you and I sat down, and I asked you about the contribution that the fire department makes to the water system, $20,000 a year, and I told you at that time that I had Kirk, who's been telling us for the last 6 years that the contribution doesn't match up with what the public fire protection actually costs. And so what I had him do was go back. They used to do the rate studies, and he would include those in the rate studies. Well, the last one that was done, that the company who did the rate study for us showed it as the fire protection gross allocated costs on the water utility to be $76,257. So I took that money, that amount, that was the true cost of what public fire protection costs the public water system, and I asked our assessor if she would apply the state tax commission inflation rate multipliers to it and bring it up to date with 2014. Now, it's not an exact science, I understand, because it's taken what was actual costs in 2001, the last time that rate study was actually performed, and then using the inflation rate multipliers, but that came out to $103,612.50. So I'm just curious about, it's based on that, it's like an $83,000 shortfall that the fire department doesn't pay to the water department. In other words, all of the customers that are on township water in addition to the 2.5 mils that they pay for fire protection, also subsidize an additional $83,000 annually for fire protection. And if we were to charge the fire department and require you to pay that full amount to the water department, what does that look like in your budget if we were suddenly asked, if you were asked by the board to find an additional $83,000?
Can you turn that little receiver on, Bob, or not on there? Okay, yeah, you're good now, I think.
You know, we've been fighting with this for years, and it's not, is it a law that we have to pay them? Is it in the ordinance we have to pay them? You know, Kurt, he has a fire protection fee right now for the people who are hooked up to sprinkler systems. I don't know how many they have are hooked up, but just to go, for the fire department, we're paying $45 a month just to have the hookup there. You look at Menards, Walmart, the Westwood Mall, they're paying $160 a month per line going in. So in the Westwood Mall, you have two 12-inch mains going in to the mall. You have one going into Yonkers, one going into Penny's, and one going into Kohl's. So right there, he's collecting what? $1,000 a month, roughly? 19. Oh, all right. So, my feeling is if he wants to charge the people a fire protection fee, then he should come up with a fee and put it on the water bill. You know, you have 1,102 water customers. And then you got 425 garbage customers above that. You have people who have water mains in front of their house are not paying nothing for the water, but they're getting the benefit from it. So, you know, and it's going to be the same thing next year and the year after. Because we don't, you know, we're looking at replacing a truck, minimum $600,000. Our turnouts, our bunkers are going to have to be replaced. There's $90,000. If we want to buy that land behind us and put some type of training facility there, that could be another $500,000. Now we have one truck that's 20 years old. We have one truck that's 15 years old. And our newest truck is probably the worst shape in the other two. And so, you know, we try to keep up on our maintenance of our trucks. I can't see, you know, and we're paying for our building. We have 6 more years to pay for that. Then after that, we have a balloon on it. What is that money gonna, you know, how much is that we need for that? The other question is, and Randy was talking about earlier, is just taxes. If we don't win, you know, if the township doesn't win, we're losing about $47,000. So, you know, that's what we figured our budget as for this year. Worst case scenario. We came out with $15 ahead if we don't win. And the other question is, what happens if we don't win? How much money do we have to pay back? And where's that money coming from?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. I think that, you know, we tend to dissect the public works budgets ad nauseum. We go through every single thing, and we're real sensitive to even, you know, 5 or 6 cents increases in water rates or fees as a board, and have been historically. Yet I think that it's very important that we as a board also recognize that contribution. Water customers are subsidizing fire department operations. Now, it may be that we should look at millage. Maybe we you need to ask for an increase in millage, or at least the board acknowledges that they're not, that the water customers are going to subsidize a portion of public fire protection. But I think as a board, it has to be out there that we understand that we're shorting, according to what the rate consultants tell us, that we're shorting Public Works Water Department's budget by $80,000, and that we're going to subsidize that, with water customers are going to subsidize that, as long as everybody understands it. And if the board makes a decision that they're comfortable with that, then it's fine, right? I mean, but I think we have to face it. Kirk's been saying it forever and ever, and I've said, well, how much do you think it should be? And he would say, I don't know, we haven't done a rate study in years. It was this year when he brought it up again, when I was sitting down with him, that I asked, well, I mean, how do we go about doing a rate study? When was the last time you ever did one? And that's how I got the historical information out. So by taking that and bringing it up, I'm like, wow, I mean, $100,000, if you're only given 20, it doesn't seem fair to the water department, who then were beating up and telling him that we're holding him to a 2% increase, or that he can't hire somebody even though he needs it, when in reality, if we gave him the extra $83,000, he wouldn't have any problem financing the additional position he's looking for. And I'm not saying that that's the answer, is to have you pull $83,000 out of retained funds and give it to the water department. I'm not saying that that's the answer. What I'm saying is that if the board went that way, it would be an awful tough decision for your department, is what I'm hearing, right?
Right. And, and I go back to the question is, it's done by the rate study, and, but does the township have the ordinance saying fire department will pay the water department, or is it a law? Because there's quite a few townships out there, they don't pay anything.
No, it's not it's not in our ordinance that we collect everything from the fire department for public fire protection, and it's certainly not a law. We're not violating the law by doing it. It's boards, certainly within the board's purview to decide that we're not going to collect it, or that water customers are going to subsidize, in addition to the 2.5 mils that they pay, that they are going to subsidize the fire department a little bit more for public fire protection. It's for the good of the community. We can do that as a board, but I just think that it has to be out there, that we understand as a board, everybody acknowledges the fact that that's what's going on.
If you're looking at public fire protection fee or whatever, you're going to have to add in the additional 400 and some people who are not on the water.
Right.
And, my feeling, I don't think we should pay anything. Honestly, Kurt thinks he should get it all. And we've been having this fight for 20 years. And unless something's written down and said, this is it, and we're going to have the same thing next year. And it's going to be brought up again. And, but in the near future for us, we're not going to have any money. We have $100,000 right now put away for a truck, and that's it. We have no money put away for equipment or replacement of our turnouts, for the additional building in the back. So, we're kind of, unless you find a sugar daddy someplace, we're strapped.
I had that circled too, with a question mark, is what are we gonna do about this? But tell us what that's supposed to be for. What does the water study say that the payment is supposed to be for? I mean, water protection's kind of a, nebulous term. What's it supposed to cover?
Right, and I could give you and I'll actually make copies of this for the board. But the gist of it is that more and more costs are getting pushed through user charges. And so when you start talking about requiring fire protection related costs to be recovered as part of normal water rates, it would be one thing if we knew that everybody was on everybody who's on water benefits from fire protection, and you can charge it through water rates, and that's kind of what these rate guys talk about. But because we don't have, everybody isn't on our water system. So when you look at fire protection, the biggest thing, when the system is constructed, mains, the storage tanks, pumps, they're all sized to permit flows capable of handling general water service customers as well as fire flow needs. So when you start talking about the infrastructure that we put in for the requirement for fire flow capability, that results in the construction of a larger system than you would need if you were just building it for water customers alone. And so that is where the identifiable costs associated with the existence of fire flow capacity. So if you think of it as what they asked the rate consultants to do back then was to carve it out, just like what portion of this system as it exists, as it stands right now, is sized specifically to meet the needs of the fire flow for public fire protection, to have fire flow to the various businesses, to the fire hydrants, the whole 9 yards, right? Like what percentage of the amount of operating costs every year should be dedicated or are dedicated directly to that percentage of public fire protection. That's where they got the money built in, is pretty much the additional capacity built into the system to handle fire flows and fire protection. And it said it's dated because, you know, we're going to get ready for 2015 to do another rate study. It'll be that third year rate study with the city. That would be the time for the board to approve them to expand that rate study to include, to get this number updated again. Like I said, the last time we did it was 2001, and I had to, you know, the only way I had to bring it current from the $76,257 that was identified at that time was to just use inflation multipliers to kind of give us a ballpark. I'm sure it wouldn't be, it's not exact, it's not going to exactly follow inflation multipliers. But it's probably, when I looked at it, I'm like, it's probably going to be $100,000. I mean, in today's dollars, from 2001 to now, it's probably going to be somewhere around $100,000. It'll be interesting to see what that rate study brings out. If it comes out as, you know, $100,000 annually, if the board decides that water customers are going to subsidize fire protection, then the board decides it. It's not, like Bob said, are we violating ordinance or law? The answer is absolutely not. There's nothing that says we have, you know, that we can't recoup costs this way. But and if that's what we decide to do, I'm fine with that if that's where the board wants to go. But I think we need to have that conversation, because I never fully understood, when Kirk's been saying it for, you know, the last 6 budget cycles, but I never get fully reimbursed from public fire protection. And we've always said, well, you know, oh, the 20,000, okay, well, you know, you'll get the 20,000. This is the first time that I actually had the information and I read it and I was like, you're right, you don't get fully reimbursed. So, you know, before we never had a number to put it on. Now I say it's $103,000. Well, if they're only given 20, and you heard Bob's take, he's like, he doesn't think they should have to pay anything as a department. I don't know how our residents feel if I'm a water customer and I say, well, wait a minute, I'm paying my 2.5 mils, plus I'm paying my portion of an additional $83,000 to subsidize it. That's not fair. I'd rather you raise the millage and everybody pays, because everybody receives the benefit.
Hey, Dennis?
Yeah.
Another thing, you know, we're paying $20,000, but if you, and I don't know how many people or businesses are on, have a sprinkler system, who's paying that fee, you know, that money there should be part of the.
Yeah, and Bob, that's a really good catch. I don't see it anywhere in the information that I got whether that was captured or not, and I'd have to ask Kirk that question if we can go back, because those fees that they're collecting for that particular portion of public fire protection may offset the $103,000. I don't know that answer right now.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good catch. I think it's a good point. But I think when we get like this next year's rate study, I think that as a board, I mean, I'm going to encourage the board to spend the additional funds when we're doing the rate study anyway, to go ahead and pull it out and have it, and then we'll see all those breakdowns and we'll get an answer for that. And if he's recouping some of it from there, then we certainly wouldn't be asking your department to fully fund it back again. And we may continue to, we may just move it like we're going, but one of the biggest struggles as a board we've had year after year after year is public works and water and sewer rates and the fees and how tough it is on the folks. And then you say, well, wait a minute, Kirk keeps saying, but I could meet it if I was getting my full reimbursement from the fire department. Then we, as a board, should be honest with ourselves and say, okay, we'll make the fire department fully reimburse you, but then how do we make you whole again, right? I mean, we can't
Right.
pull out, $100,000 out of your budget annually and leave you short either. We have to plan for one of the most important things that we face as a board is protection of safety of our residents. So I'm not trying to cut $100,000 out of your budget and say, I don't know, Bob, I mean.
Well, and I know at the last meeting, Pete asked about the same question. And I've been getting feedback from people who watched it, and they want to know why we're paying anyways. And the only answer I really have for them is, it's part of the study, Do we have to follow the study? That's not up to me.
But direct costs associated with public fire protection cost that department, when he's trying to come up with enough revenue, when he's figuring out what his rates are he's going to charge. If we back $100,000 or you give him another $83,000, the rates come down on water. Absolutely. The user rates come down.
So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul to get the same amount.
Except that the users are funding it then.
Well, see, and that's why when Richmond Township, before it used to be a hydrant rental fee. And Richmond Township was sued over it about 15 years ago, and the guy won. Because when you're taking money for a hydrant rental fee, the people out of the hydrant district are paying taxes, they're not getting service out of it. And it was Billy Lutzo, you can talk to him, he'll probably fill you in on it, but,
Bob Beams, I think.
yep.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So, and that's why it was switched to, but it's still, I don't think we should pay it at all. It's a service to the township, and I know where Kurt's coming, if I could get more money too, but, I'm stuck at 2.5 mils, or the department is, and, we have things that we have to get done, and it's costing more and more, and we're just talking about if this law goes through about replacing our hose every 10 years, that's be, 50 feet of hose is $110 for a 50 feet, 1.5 inch hose.
Right. I mean, we've been in a very pleasant, unique situation that we've continued to grow our SEV year after year after year, which has raised our taxable base, which ends up a little bit more money in your coffers when you're flat at 2.5 mils. You get more money every year based on our growth, our economic growth, which is awesome. And I get that. But if, not everybody in the township is not on the water system. And that's the struggle I have is that, I'm a water customer, and so I pay my 2.5 mils, and I pay to subsidize through water rates the additional public fire protection charge.
Well-
Is it fair to me when every neighbor in my immediate surrounding is not on the water system, and we all have received the same fire protection, but I pay more through subsidizing my rates through the water department, and they don't?
But when the water system was put in, 73 and 74, it was, every person in Trowbridge had a special assessment. So when they put the water main in, 12-inch main, 10-inch, whatever it was, and they built the water tank, those people paid for that because there was no water fund. Bill was totaled up, and it was paid for. And I think instead of the water department increasing their system, and paying for it, I think they should have special assessments put out there for the people who are getting, look at Grove Street and 492. Those people, I don't know how many customers are there, but they have the water main put in, they didn't pay nothing,
I agree, but I'm on the Grandview Circle project, and I paid the special assessment to get water.
Right.
So, and I think from most of the ones we're doing, as we expand the system, everybody pays a special assessment. I wasn't on the board when they ran out to get to the, out to 492, to get to those tanks. Would I have voted to assess those people a special assessment because water was run across the front of their property? Probably, because it made it available. And we have one system, everybody has to pay in, we have one system. So when we make improvements, everybody pays, but it still goes back to, is it fair for water customers to pay more for fire protection than non-water customers? And if the board says it's fair, then I guess we move forward, but I struggle with it when it was $20,000 that he was getting, and you're thinking, yeah, okay, I understand that, cost of maintaining, even hydrants, things like that, but it's more than that. It's much more than that. I think you brought up some good points about the fees that he charges for fire protection. Are they coming off that number? I'll find the answer to that question and get back to you on it. But at the same time, I think that we as a board, we either say, we understand that water rate customers are subsidizing more for fire protection than non-water users. And if we do that as a board and we agree to it, fine. And that should be the end of it. You say it keeps coming up year after year after year. You're right, and so we as a board need to either set it and move it forward and say, we understand and this is what we're doing, or we have to change that and say, it's not right. We're gonna have you make Kirk whole for the water department budget, but we still have to figure out a way to make you whole as well, right? I mean, as a board. But I think we can't, in order to make it stop coming up year after year, Bob, we do the study and we say as a board, here's our philosophy. Here's the way we see this. We're moving forward. Yes, we don't capture all that money. And I don't know what other municipalities do. I don't know how other people treat it. I need those answers too. Has it become a generally accepted practice to make your water customers subsidize fire protection for the public's greater good over people who are non-water customers? That may be a standard in the industry. I don't know the answers to that question either. But I'd like to find out through that rate study next year. Are we an anomaly? Are we the only ones? You said systems that don't pay at all. Fire departments that don't contribute to the public water system at all. I'm sure that's the case. But I don't think we've had a clear policy developed. I don't think the board has said anything on it. We weren't sure what the rate study was even showing until right now. And I think we have to put our hands around it and grab onto it, and so that we can look at residents and say, yes, water rate customers do subsidize it somewhat. We're looking into it. We're doing a rate study next year, and we'll reevaluate it at the next budget session on what our policy is. Or we can say the board set policy. We've determined that this is in everyone's best interest, and we move forward. But at least we have to be honest about it and have policy set, and that's my only point. I'm bringing that up. I don't know what the answer is for this year. I don't know how to ask you to come up with another $83,000 this year, to be honest with you. Take it out of fund balance. Bob, does that hurt your fund balance if I take $83,000 out and give it to water?
Yeah,
I mean, what do you have right now for a fund balance?
180,000. 10,000 for a truck, 80,000 for 3 months operating.
Okay, I need the $83,000 out of there for the water department. How you doing now? You all right? You comfortable with where you're at?
No,
I understand.
See, I went back 15 years, 15, 16 years of that. And it said, I always heard that we had a study and that should be paid. And that's why my email to you, I felt like for the 5 years, it's like a loan. Now Kirk is, searching for money, so you add some more people on to help do some of those things. So I thought, well, can you increase it? So it started off to be 15,000, then it went to 20,000, and for 5 years went to nothing, then we went back to 20,000. So I thought what I heard about the study, it was accurate, it was an accurate thing. So if someone had to be agreed, maybe before you, or how long you've been fire chief, but you agreed upon it somewhere along the line, and it's been going on there for 5 years, they stopped it because you needed a fire truck or something like that, to my understanding. And then I look at Kirk, he needs a little hand here because he needs some help. Why don't we just increase that fund to 30 or 40,000 for a couple of years to get him balanced off? And but I think the rate study has to be done. One way or another, we have to find out exactly where we stand and what's right and what's how do you figure that out? So.
And I guess after the rate study's done and find out all the numbers,
Yeah.
I guess either, get a millage for it or set something up that's gonna be in concrete for a while and we don't have to come back to this every year.
So we don't have to talk about this every year, 20,000 or 15,000, 30, 40,000, I mean, it's something that's been going on since 1998.
And I brought up about the DDA taking 550,
Yeah.
Are we gonna get that back?
Yeah.
I took 552,000 from you, from the
Well-
township right now.
Theoretically, you get it back. Like any of those TIF captures by all of the development that's out here since we captured that money, put in the infrastructure, and you've got everything from the theater to the new construction going up. All of the buildings out here now are on the tax roll, which then that increased, is now, SEV is now paying off in your 2.5 mils that should
Jump it up.
make you whole within,
But we
10
went-
years, and then everything on top of that now is additional revenue for you.
But then again, we went from 84 calls a year to 260 calls.
Right?
So,
Well, I'm not arguing that point.
No.
I know you're busy.
and we can go all night here, but any other questions?
Yeah.
No questions for Bob, just comments. I was on the board probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago now, when, well, sort of, I guess, but the 20,000 was there, and we discontinued it for 4 or 5 years, five, for some funding that they needed at the time. I think it was the truck at the time. And we did, for a short period of time, slap $1 on everyone's water bill, and that was not very popular. I can tell you that. There was over 100 people in the township hall the following meeting, and the board quickly rescinded that. So I don't think that extra money on the water bill is would be very good. I can tell you that. But I guess my comments would be is do the rate study next year, which we're going to have to do anyway, see where it comes out, and I guess we'll have to make an equitable agreement on where we think it should be. And then we can at least set it for this board's term. The following board can do what they want. So, at least we can maybe set it for at least 1 year. But if we do set policy on it, maybe that would help keep it in place for a longer period of time. So those are my comments.
Thanks, Randy. I have another question for you, Bob. It's in regards to the capital improvements project request form, and in the last one from 2013, you had in there that the water pump house out on County Road 550 and the Lindbergh gravel pit to increase the water supply for the northern part of the township.
Yep.
And you had in there that it was very important to improve the safety of the residents and fire personnel in emergency, and that it should start in 2013. Have we done that?
We're working with Grimes
Crimmins?
from Lindbergh. We're trying to get a piece of property where they're not using it. And Bromley was looking at drawing up a building for us, and so we can get a more rough estimate on the cost of that. The biggest thing right now is getting the land, and if we can get a lease or buy it or whatever. I talked with Pete Glover from the DNR about it, because they're gonna have to issue permits, and he is looking into that also.
Have you been setting aside any money in your budget for this project?
We have the 10,000 for professional services right now, and, all our money right now has been going for the new building. If we run out this year's budget, the way I figure, we're gonna roughly have $100,000 carryover. I would like to take part of that for the generator, and we talked about that earlier, and put some of this money aside for our turnouts, and take the rest of it, break it up for the building, equipment replacement, vehicle replacement.
Okay. Will that still allow you to have enough money to put towards the payment for the new facilities?
Yes, that's budgeted in there, $80,000 we got budgeted in for that.
Okay. And you had in the CIP that it was projected cost somewhere between $30,000 to $35,000 to create that pump house, and you think that's still probably accurate?
It's probably about 40, 45 now.
Okay.
And the biggest thing is gonna be the cost of the land, if we lease the land, buy the land, or if the land is donated.
Okay. And I know that you had it in there, that's why I bring it up, is because the rank importance of the project was very important, and we're in the process of trying to revamp the capital improvements planning that we do as a township and change this whole process, and it'll start to get where you're gonna rate it on a priority list. And I think that it's important for us as board, if you're gonna put it on there and we're gonna improve it, we approve it, we say, yes, we like this project, we approve the capital improvements plan, that we stay on top of it and say, have we provided you with the funding to build what you need? You've listed this as a high priority project, that it's important for the safety of the residents, especially in the north part of the township. Then if it is a high priority and it's important, then I don't want to lose sight of it either. And that's why I'm going to keep asking about it. Do we put the money aside? Are we prepared to do it? You would have liked to have seen it built in 2013, and here we are working on 2015's budget, and we don't have it accomplished yet. So if it's important, as I'm talking about pulling another $83,000 out of your budget, do we have enough money to do this project as well? And I think, we've got to provide you with the tools that you need, but I want to make sure we're funding adequately. Is the 2.5 mils adequate? And, I know our revenue stream is under attack. Will we win with the Supreme Court? They're not going to touch it till after the election, like we said all year. Will we see it this year? Will they pick it up next year? We don't know. Luckily, we still are a very attractive place to locate businesses. We still have a tremendous potential for growth. We still have a lot of things that are happening right now and that are in the works, but we expect our revenue will maintain it and grow because of our growth. So we've got a good problem to have that a lot of folks don't have the availability. But man, I don't want to lose sight of these. We asked you to come up with projects for the CIP. Then as a board, it's our job to make sure that those are being budgeted for, followed up, and prepared and planned for. If it's that important, then I'd like to have firm commitments in your budget. Do you have enough money? Can we get it going next year? Is it a project that should be in 2015, or is it a 2016 project? That'll help us with our budgeting. Right. Other question I have for you is, we had in here a recommendation to increase office pay, and I was just wondering about comparative data with other departments. The last time we talked about increasing pay for everybody in the department, the board made the statement that we were okay with increasing the pay at that time, even though we were probably one of the highest paid departments in the area, or in the UP even maybe, with the idea that we wanted to attract and retain the best possible people. We're a very high profile community. We put a lot of pressure on our department because of who we are and where we are. We're very visible, and we're requiring additional training. So yeah, we agreed with it. But I'm just curious, did you do any comparative data this time? Do we know where we're at as far as what our guys are getting paid on a per call basis or versus other departments?
No, we didn't. We went with, we haven't had a raise in 4 years. So, that's why we went for the $1 an hour. That's 1.5% over the last 4 years. Public Works, other employees got 2% raise. If we would have went 2%, it would have been 32 cents a year. We do every year, every 4 years. It just makes it easier on, everybody knows in 4 years they're going to get a raise. And be honest with you, a lot of the people, they get it, they don't. It's not, and-
For the board's purposes, would you be able to provide, we won't finalize this
Can
budget,
MDA do that for us?
and perhaps they could, it may be readily available from the MTA, but I'd love to see it just for board's purposes, where we are in a comparative, what we pay our guys versus other departments. And if you could provide that to the board, I would greatly appreciate it.
for that,
Like you said earlier, I just want to just interject here real quick. You did say, and we are a very high demand department. So it's hard, we're not comparing apples with apples when we do this study.
I understand that.
Okay.
no,
Well, I think we've got the best department around. You guys have heard me say it a bunch of times, and we're very highly visible. So we require more.
Different than the one we put on the top.
We require more than other departments. And therefore, was our board's philosophy beforehand at saying, and we'll pay for that, right? We're willing to pay for that. But I'd still like to have a comparative analysis just to say,
Might
okay,
be
here we are.
underpaid, again, maybe more so.
well, we don't want to go there either, Pete.
Population, SEV.
They can do, you can, if you talk to the MTA and see if they'll run it, you can run it all those ways with the MTA, SEV,
Square miles.
similar population, those kind of things.
Size of townships.
Yeah, size of the townships. If the SEV is capturing that data on paid on call, they can provide all of that, and it will be broken out by different parameters. If they don't have that information, then just call around the regular departments and we'll see what's around us. We're not going to say, oh, well, Powell Township only pays this much, so therefore you guys shouldn't make more than Powell.
There's only one department in the UP that is fully volunteer. That's up in the Copper Country. And they get paid, they get physicals every year.
The boot jack? Up on the hill?
I don't think it was Boot Jack. Yeah. But and that was about 5 years ago.
Randy?
For the very purposes you folks have all cited tonight, it's not realistic to look around the UP. There aren't any other departments except maybe adjacent to, I don't know, Escanaba, but most of the really comparables are going to be Traverse City area, places like that, and we can get that through the MTA. I can work with the chief to get that kind of data. Places that are growing that have, like Acme Township and places like that around them, basically, that generate the same kind of activity that we actually generate. So I can work with the chief on that.
Okay, well, there you go. You just got a volunteer who's willing to,
Get the information.
who's willing to help you with that information. And Randy, if you could do that and get it out to the board as soon as you guys were able to capture that, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. If I could, just make a couple of comments about the rate study.
Sure.
We're actually talking about two different things here. We're talking about a rate study, which is the cost of providing water to your residents, and you're talking about a cost of service study, which is, I think, what you really want to talk about, is a cost of service study. The issue gets complicated, and it's been complicated all the 12 years that I've been here, almost 13 years, with regard to how the water system operates and how you capture those costs. One of the things that the chief mentioned is the places like the Walmarts and Pennies and Yonkers and all those places that have their independent fire systems. The reason they pay that monthly fee is because they're not metered. Those systems are not metered. If they don't pay for the water they use for testing, they don't pay for the water that they use if there's a fire event, and that's why they pay that. It's to build up that fund. So if one of those things does go off and you got 40,000 gallons of water, who's going to pay for that? Are the rate payers? No, they're not. The history of putting in the water system is complicated because one system is funded under the federal requirements, which says that the people who are directly impacted by it pay. The most recent ones that we've done through the state have been the entire water users pay. So you've got a couple of different frameworks. So realistically, I think if you want to look at the benefit versus the cost, what you're really looking at is a cost of service type of a survey, which Baker Tilly wouldn't do. They're the ones that do our water rate studies with the city, and that's actually the cost of acquiring and distributing the water to come up with a per gallon rate. It's a little bit different than what I think you need to do here. So those are my only comments.
All right, thanks. Other questions for the fire department?
I did circle that too, because I figured I was gonna ask Randy when we started tonight, when is a good time to talk about this contribution? Because I didn't know if that had to be at a board meeting or not, but we need to solve it. But my question too was what Bob touched on a little bit, was the fees for the bigger lines coming in. I had just assumed that that's where, I can't assume, but I figured that was the extra cost for those, was to cover the fire protection.
Well, some of that does, but like I say, it's basically it's an availability charge more than an actual fee, because the system is there in case they have a fire. It's not like your house. You have access to the water all the time. You're using water and you're paying the water rates. These folks aren't paying for that, and they're not paying for any water through it unless they have an event. And when they do their annual or whenever they do their tests, they don't pay for that water. It's not metered. There is no meter on that. So
More of an insurance policy then.
that's pretty much what it is. And in most cases, the developers pay for that and then deed it over to the township, pay for that connection. Now, we put the main in, but they pay their lateral connection and then deed it over to the township. So it's a complicated issue to come down to what the real contribution should be, or if there should even be one. Should there be, a fee-for-service study may recommend a totally different structure than what we have. Yeah, you never know, and it's a very specialized kind of a system. Lynn had asked me after the last session to do a little bit of research, and and I've been looking into what kind of companies do that kind of study for municipalities that have multiple type services like this. So I'll have something for you for your board meeting tomorrow.
Any other questions for Bob? I think we're done for today,
Again?
but I'll have more by the time I see you next. I know you wanted to, I know you needed to get out of here, so I have a couple, but I can ask you those on the side, and then as we go to wrap up the whole thing after we've gotten through everything, any lingering questions from any board members at that time, we'll try to give you a heads up for us. You can come prepared to address those ahead of time. Thanks. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Bob.
And you guys were on the general fund, so I walked in late. I apologize for that when I was at the hospital with my son. Yeah, I'll make copies for all the board members of the information that I have here.
Is that supposed to be for us, the township, or is that like a general one from the state? Or?
No, this was specifically for us.
Yeah, and that was done some time ago.
Yeah, this was 2001. There's one from 97 that I also have that I don't have in this packet.
Who actually
But
did?
I've got one from 1997, and I took this one from 2001, and I think 97's $60,134. It was at in 1997. So when you take that and then you look 64,649 gross allocated costs for Marquette Township's water utility for public fire protection, and then it was $76,257 in 2001. So 5 years later.
Dennis, who did those studies? Does it say on there who did them?
No, but it came out of this as a part of the rate studies that we were doing at the time for.
Okay, so I know who did it. It was that independent consultant who also did cost of service studies.
So you think this is a cost of service and not part
That
of
portion of it was probably a cost of service
What's a
study.
cost of service study?
Yeah.
They have in here that it's a cost of
Yeah,
service study.
okay, so that's what it was.
Because they go into it,
Yep.
they
It was
go into
probably
it pretty
John.
detailed, they separated out public fire protection from private fire protection for
Yeah.
businesses, and it's pretty detailed. And they have, like our fire protection for the township, and they also have, the city of Marquette's was in here as well
Yeah.
because of.
That was
as part of the
likely,
rate study.
that was likely Mr. Mayor who was doing them at that time, and the city didn't want any part of him to do the most recent studies because he was eminently fair.
So how would we, if we were gonna try to change the way we do this and charge the people who are not in the water system for protection, what method could we do it?
Well, that's where your
We don't
your
have the
millage
water
levy.
bill to add it on.
No, that is where your millage levy comes in. Your millage levy is township-wide, and that's basically because everybody in the township has access to the fire protection. It's just that they're not on the water system per se. So that's how you have that split between the two. It's not the same like the city of Marquette. Everybody in the city of Marquette's on the water system and on the fire system, so it's all rolled into one fee, one cost for your water. What we've got here is we've got a segmented system, and basically what you need to do then is you need to do a combined cost of service study and a rate study, basically, and that's what John Mayer used to do. He did them combined. Baker Tilly doesn't do it that way. Baker Tilly does basically just a rate structure, a rate, the cost of getting the water and transmitting it out to the people to get it. How, what you charge those folks. So we're talking two different things, and what we may be in the market for basically is a separate cost of service study that would not only be fire, but would address what we charge for site plan review, what we charge for all of the services that we do, and then also internally, Kirk gives me $23,000 from the water fund, $23,000 from the wastewater, $12,000 from solid waste. Well, that's to cover potentially the general services budget. Basically, what do we provide to them? That would be included in that cost of service. So you would get a laundry list, basically, of all of your services that you provide, what the cost is, and how those should be allocated.
And then we could get a percentage or whatever the formula ends up being, so every year for the budget, we can have an actual number.
Correct.
Some of you must have had a start, because, I mean, this has been going on for 17 years, so.
Well, they do them
Is it always
regularly.
a argument every year? For
It is.
the past 17 years?
Kirk's been making this argument forever and just never got the full cost.
That's why I
and
circled it and said.
I think
Yeah.
you can understand his frustration. Like this time when I sat down with him, I'm like, you say it year after year after year, but what do you want us to do? We don't know how much it is. We don't have a dollar figure. You keep telling us you think it should be more, or that if you had a cost of service study, it'd be more. I'm like, but how do we know? How can we? And he's like, well, let me show you this. And then he pulls this out, and I'm like, well, why didn't you give me this 6 years ago?
Well, and the reason
If I had this 6 years ago, I would have.
You would have made some
probably
sense.
already addressed it.
Yeah.
I just never had I need facts. I need something I can pick up and touch, and I can do that with this. And now it makes sense to me.
Well, and that's what you get with a cost of service study, but they're expensive. I mean, because you have somebody come in here and they spend a couple of months basically going through everything, and basically what they come out with is they come out with a report saying, your accountant provides services to the fire department, to the public works, and her salary should be distributed in this manner, and then they come down at the end with a chart basically that says, water department, you owe the general fund this much money. Fire department, you owe general fund this much money. Right now there's $4,000 you see that comes from the fire department. That's to cover Lois's services, to cover my services, and all of the things that we do. But there's no rhyme or reason. It's just been there. It's been $4,000. It's been $20,000. It's been $23,000 forever, without ever being looked at again. So, do I think we're at a point where it makes sense to do that? I think it does. It answers a lot of these questions going forward, and it may impact what your per 1,000 gallon rate structure is for water and sewer.
Well, that's Kirk is pretty adamant that we should do this cost of service study. So that tells me Kirk feels
He's
that
pretty comfortable with it.
he is be very comfortable with how it comes out. But it may mean we reallocate money to where our rates do come down on water. Our
Absolutely.
rates may come down on wastewater because of the allocation that we're currently doing. And that's entirely possible. And I mean, Kirk's been pushing for it, but I never fully understood it. And shame on me for not getting it. I mean, I know he kept throwing it out there, but now that it's out there, I don't know what it's going to cost us to do it. And the board may balk if we find out it's $10,000 to do a cost of service study. But I always prefer fact-based decisions over our best guesstimates.
Absolutely.
And I looked at it, when I looked at this thing right here, and the reason behind it, because he had a hard time, he needed a truck. Well, I look at Kirk, and after talking with Kirk for a couple different times, and, he's struggling with that, and he needs another guy. He's got a guy who's going to retire and all these other things. And I thought, what the hell, it looks like a loan. And then I went to the meeting for the public, for the Marquette Road Commission in Escanaba, and they come to, just almost fighting between down there and Iwanaki. You know, Iwanaki is gonna take that guy right by the ears. I gave you money last year out of my fund because I didn't need it. Now I need it back. And that's the way I looked at this thing here. 5 years or $100,000. No, and that's my argument to Bob. Well, it looks to me as if you owe him because, you know.
Right.
It's a lot like your CIP, basically. You don't do a cost of service study every year. It might be good for 5 years, and might be good for 7 years. It's like a compensation system, same thing. You know, you go through and you evaluate everything, you establish what the system is, you adopt it, it's in place, you update it periodically. And then it's a relatively minor update from that standpoint.
Well, I
So-
think if we do it,
I think it's important that we do
year.
it.
moving into 2015 and we accomplish it, then at least we know, and Lynn's right, if we decide to use percentages after that until you wait 8 years and do it again, or 6 years, or whatever the board's comfortable with doing, but you say, you know, based upon where we were at then, you can set it, and it will probably hold and follow the rate of inflation or the rate of our growth somewhat for at least 5 or 6 or whatever number of years before there would, you know, or barring any unforeseen big differences in our infrastructure, our system, or whatever, everything would pretty much hold the same for those fees or how it's split out.
And you would allocate the cost 3 ways to keep the cost down. Fire department would contribute some, public works would contribute, and general fund would contribute. We can pull that out of our fund balances to cover, if it's a $10,000 cost, we each put, you know, $3,250 in. You know.
But I think it makes sense for us, and that's what, like I said, sitting down with Kirk this year was totally different for me. It was an eye-opener, and then I gave Bob the heads up that I'm gonna ask you this question, and I want you to do some digging. I want you to be prepared to answer it, because, you know, I don't want to blindside you here, but what if I ask you for $83,000? Because it's fair. Kirk's point is very valid. We're sitting there, Kirk said, I get beat up year after year after year for public works, for rates, for, you know, asking for this, yet you guys continue to short me. You won't even nobody says a word to the fire department about covering what they have to cover. And I think what got them this year was the September 30th budget session, and Dan said, Kirk's budget isn't balanced because he's not making his contribution in wastewater to the general fund. And Kirk's like, he didn't say anything at the meeting, and then he tells me after,
Yeah, he did.
my balance budget isn't balanced. He's like, you know, and he said, and Dan said in the same night that the fire department had a balanced budget. They don't have a balanced budget. They owe me money. So then we got into all this whole thing again, and I'm like, all right, look, I'm bringing it up. The board's going to make a decision one way or the other here, and I get where he's coming from. I mean, he's got a very valiant argument. He's like, I'm sitting here getting beat up for rate increases. Nobody wants to hire somebody who I desperately need, yet give me the money, and I can afford my person, and rates will go down. And it's a valid argument.
Except that Kirk can and has raised his rates pretty much every year since we've been here.
Yep.
Bob hasn't had that luxury, and I think that's what Bob's looking at, saying.
Well, Bob's
But-
been,
He
but
has
see,
raised it
but
because
see,
of
here-
the taxation of the.
well, that's it, and
township.
that-
He's getting more
see, and
money.
that's what you have to understand is that,
He doesn't have the
Right.
ability to do that.
well, it's automatic. He doesn't have to. It's
But if I'm
automatic
going
as growth
from
goes up.
2.5 mils in 1998 of 94 million, or 2.5 mils on 276 million, Bob's raised his rates.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
got a nice
He's-
increase.
You know, the increase has come through for him, and that's why his increase is built in automatically every year.
And the
And-
difference with Public Works is that they have to recover their cost. I mean, he hasn't raised his rates, basically, he just dictated to raise his rates because the cost of the system has gone up, for a number of reasons, whatever, but it's apples and oranges. I mean, it is, and that's one of the problems you have with trying to do a cost of service study, is
Right.
because the services are different.
We may decide not to touch anything this year and move forward with just the way it is as a board, but at least I want to be able to tell people
We're looking at it.
that
Yeah.
we're looking into this. Here's what's going on. Yes, if you're a water customer, you subsidize fire protection more than the non-water customers, to the tune of, it's, you know, an additional, you know, whatever, $100,000 a year that the fire department has to pay to the water customers. If they're only given 20, it's 83 grand. So yes, you are subsidizing an additional $83,000 that non-water customers don't pay.
About $80 a year,
That could,
roughly.
how much?
About $80 a year, roughly.
Okay, so that, as we're sitting here saying, well, it's only gonna cost you an extra $5 a month, or total, or $3, whatever Clerk Rotary was showing this year, it's not worth coming to the meetings. He said it costs more to come to the meetings than the increase is gonna be. We're beating the heck out of Kirk, and yet, if this is what we're gonna do, at least be honest. We're gonna say, yeah, water customers, you are subsidizing a little bit more fire protection, but we don't know how else to fairly do it. We're doing a cost of service study. It may be totally different for budget 2016, based on a cost of service study. But let's be honest about it, and that's, I think, the most important thing. When we see these things and we tell people, okay, we
11, 12,
understand
40, I
it,
think,
this is
wasn't it?
what we've uncovered, we understand we're asking you to pay more,
And this is what we're gonna do going forward.
yeah.
How we're gonna address it.
Then I'll be more comfortable with it. But right now, just to ignore Kirk for, he's been chirping this for, 15 years, and everybody's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. And then they even dried up the money where they didn't pay at all for 5 years because they wanted to buy a truck, and Kirk's like,
Just to put it in perspective, you're talking about $6 a month for the 83,000.
so from a typical water customer pays an extra $6 a month to
And the-
subsidize fire protection.
Yep.
Well,
Well, there goes your rate increases. They probably wouldn't increase or they'd go down.
right. And so it's a tough call, and I mean, I know the way Bob looked at me when I threw this at him. And I understand, to
You're in the
say,
headlights, look.
Bob, I need $83,000 out of your budget. I know you think you're there, but I need $83,000 out, and it's going straight to water, but we're gonna lower water rates for everybody. All the water customers are getting a little break here. Bob's like, I don't have $83,000 in that budget. He can have if that's what we want him to do as a board, but I think we have to make tough choices. I'm serious about we can't underfund our fire department either. He's saying he thinks it's a high priority need to have that pump house up on 550. He thought we should have started construction in 2013 according to the CIP. And here we're working on the 2015 budget. It hasn't been done yet. It hasn't been budgeted. That concerns me. He's
I asked him the same thing.
he's put together an important project, and we haven't moved forward on it. We haven't pushed to find out.
That's why I was upset about $5,000 for the land over there. We just created more of a problem than we tried to get rid of over there. That 5,000 could have went through the pump house and other things. Especially if we're looking for the land behind it, we would have took that hill and, level it right off anyways. I mean, now you got worse. You don't have no drainage over there. You're gonna have impact of more snow there. That means you're gonna have more water melting down in the driveway. So what have you accomplished? Not a damn thing.
Oh, we got a lot of dirt to Lions Field.
Yeah, I mean, but that's why I got so upset over the whole thing there. And that's why I wrote him the email and,
I
Well,
understand.
and we have been talking about, Bob and I have been talking about that watering station in the north, and, I think everybody understands why that's important. I mean, when they've got a forest fire or anything up there, they've got to come almost all the way back to Marquette to refill the tankers, or they've got to shuttle water back and forth with the tankers. So we've been looking at several options. The road commission has some property. If we can't come to grips, the reason the Crimmins property on 550 is being looked at so seriously is because it's close to Partridge Bay Trail and some where the high dollar properties are. So they would just have to come down to refill. Wintertime, you can't pump from the lake. Typically, they can pump from the lake, but in the wintertime, you can't. It's
when's the
frozen.
last time you heard about that pump house?
I talked to Bob
When?
a couple months ago.
All right.
He said, yeah.
We've been talking since 2013, and it's about the first time you're talking about it?
Me? No.
No,
That's
but
the
I mean,
second
that's
time
one
I've
of
talked to
the
him
only
about it.
times I've really, he's adamantly said something about they really
Brought it
wanted
up in
it.
budget sessions,
Yeah.
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 That's the
We've-
first time.
We've actually talked about it since 2010, outside of
Right.
the
Right.
budget activity. But in budgets, I think the first time it came up was the year before you folks took office in
If it's that
budget
important, we
session.
should make sure it does happen,
Well, the new CIP I'm excited for, because that is going to have a lot of organizational capabilities into it that's going to make the whole process easier. It was a fabulous idea to come up with. But Jason was looking for, I sent him the form itself Jason's looking, or maybe he talked to you about the underneath stuff. He's looking for the report stuff.
Okay.
And how the template would be designed.
I've got all of that.
Yeah, I told him that you would, but
Okay.
in case he forgets to ask you, but he needs
Okay.
that.
Yeah, like I said, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I love that, I researched it for like 9 months, and I looked at all these different ones, and I kept researching different townships, different cities, looking at everybody's, and then the one that, I don't remember where it was from now, but the one that I pulled out, I thought, I really, really like this. This is the one that seems to me like
Oh, I got the new one.
it'll reduce the size of our master plan, because you don't have to have all that information. It doesn't have to be redundant, and it will put it where you need it, which would be in that CIP, where as a board, we can grab it. And the information's here about the infrastructure needs, about how we're gonna do this, and I think the whole priority levels, how we, as a board, when you get the first time you get your budget, there's gonna be a CIP section where you're gonna look at it and say, okay, where are we at? Are these things addressed, and where are they addressed? You're saying in here that this is a high priority, has to be done. Where's the money allocated for it? Is the money allocated for it? If not, why not? Make up your mind. Is it high priority or is it low priority? And then if it's a high priority and somebody's telling us it's a high priority, but it's not in the budget, we need to either budget for it or correct the priority, one or the other. But it really helps us to make decisions if we have that. And I think it's going to be a big time saver for all of us.
We want to start it right
And
away.
the public is behind us, because looking at this and looking at the fire department, how many negative comments have you had? So they know you're watching your dollars for them, you're trying to do the best job possible, and they're happy with it. So, that's the way I looked at it, so. But I had a question, because it just bothered me, And that's what my email went to him, and that's why I got upset when he didn't answer, so.
Yeah, I understand.
I think
We were just starting general fund when you came in. We'd gone through the narrative. We were just starting on the revenues.
it's a good place to start tomorrow.
Probably
The
is.
second forum discussion of the meeting, so.
Traveling conference, I'll tell you right up front, I don't agree with, so.
You want me to start dropping some bombs on you right now too, or you want to?
No, I'm just telling you ahead of time, I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with anything on my manager recommended budget for general fund. I want more money.
I hope you
I
do.
want the Supreme
Well,
Court to rule in our
You
favor.
have a rate study that says Bob owes you $83,000?
No, but I've got one that says the tax tribunal owes us about 200,000.
I wonder, you wonder if more people would file for the darn thing, would that speed up the whole thing or not? Here you got Jesse Scram.
Dennis, it doesn't matter who files for it. They're not going to do anything until after the
Yeah,
election.
I know
Not
that,
a
but
thing.
nothing's gonna happen
All
till after.
politicized.
Actually, that's what I've been kicking around, Pete. That's,
Huh?
we talked about it for our business.
Well,
And I said, no, I'm gonna wait until
Why
the
would you
decision,
not?
and then that'll tell me what to do.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna
I-
waste funds now. But I think that would be an impact if more people, small people, homeowners, if they started coming in, it's gonna rattle cages.
well, why won't they? I mean,
Yeah.
they will. I mean, there's
Well, the city
no
never
reason
got
not to.
too excited over it till they start getting nailed.
Township problem, they
Yeah.
keep saying.
Now, the
I
county got a little worried, now they're have some problems.
I shared that with them actually we were down in Escanaba, that Senate Economic Committee hearing down there, and I was talking to a couple of the guys from the city down there at that time, saying, this is gonna come and get you, I mean, you guys, it's not stopping here. This isn't a Marquette Township problem. This isn't just a big box problem. This is gonna snowball, and that's my biggest fear with where it's going. And now you watch where it's going, and, once we got filed with the Schramm property, you're like, well, here you go, using the same attorney. And, although Schramm argues that it's a different concept, it's the same attorney, it's the same, hey, we can do this to the tax tribunal and they'll knuckle under. And I think now you're seeing all those folks in Lansing are screaming and saying,
They
hey,
should.
we're under attack here. And it finally woke them up, but all of those communities that automatically stipulated with the threat of the tax tribunal, what happens now? I mean, it would take a legislative fix to do anything, because once you've
Sunk.
stipped and agreed to those, you can't raise it back up
No,
again.
they're stuck.
You're just there. So it's gone and gone forever, and that's my biggest concern. And I can't believe that our legislators, I appreciate Kevla and Casperson trying to push forward some legislation, but when it stalled in committee, I just felt like everybody should have been pounding on drums and,
Or, yeah. Well, just trying to impress upon maps and the county and the Heritage Trail or the, anybody that's involved with this.
And they still
And
don't
the
get it.
library said at their last meeting, well, what are we gonna do about the tax tribunal 47,000 we may have to deal with? Well, they're really not doing anything, they're just waiting too.
right.
I mean, they didn't even wanna think about it until we really started pushing it, and I
Right.
kept bringing it up at their meetings.
Yeah, and quite frankly, that's the issue that we tried to raise with the school district, but as of even today, they're still not willing. They're convinced that the governor's simply going to give them back all the money.
And what would have hurt them anyway, knowing that it would have strapped the county to at least write a letter or do some kind of a support or have the union participate?
Nothing.
Something. They would not help us at all.
The school business officials association did nothing. They wouldn't respond. They still haven't responded. Finally, now with the Supreme Court, they've issued a amicus brief, but
Right.
that's it. That's
The
all they've
county
done.
the county hired Jack Vancouvering to draft some legislation to try to make another run at it down in Lansing. They called and asked if Randy or I would want to drive down to Lansing and sit in on a, afternoon session while they were drafting it, but it was during a budget session, so we wanted to send our attorney to represent our interests, and it channeled back to me that they would prefer our attorney was not in attendance because they were afraid that because they were inviting the Michigan Chamber representatives there, that they didn't want to ruffle any feathers, and our attorney may send the wrong impression. And I thought, you have got to be kidding me. I do want to ruffle their feathers. I don't want if we draft legislation that they accept, we lost anyway, is
Yeah.
my theory.
Well, it's going to
So-
be somewhere middle of the road. It's not going to be, so we only lose half of what we were going to lose,
Now the
which
chamber's
is
on
still
ball, now
significant.
they're on.
So I'm
same
frustrated with it, and you think, oh, the chamber, well, that's just all a whole group of businesses. No, it's not. It's all the big box retailers. That's who the chamber is. It's the big box retailers who want to write the legislation now, which, I don't know, I guess that doesn't give me a warm fuzzy feeling if they're writing the legislation on how much taxes they're gonna pay. Why don't we
Especially-
just make it voluntary? Why don't we just ask them how much they're willing to pay?
Especially if it's authored by Shapiro.
No
Yeah,
doubt.
really.
So, how much are you guys willing to pay this year? Okay, well, thanks.
You got Shapiro, now you got the Pfeiffer, who's the attorney for the Municipal thing.
Oh, yeah.
He's up here now.
So, we better close this session out.
Yeah.